Kurt Busch gives an update on potential return to the NASCAR Cup Series. Carl Edwards is now ruling out a potential possibility of returning to NASCAR. And Ross Chastain once again gets into it with multiple different drivers. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go ahead by starting to talk about Monster Energy. As Adam Sir reported last night, that Monster Energy is starting to begin to market Ty Gibbs. Ty Gibbs, of course, pretty much every single race drives the Monster Energy cars, had the Monster Energy cars really since 2020 or 2021. And it's really good to see that one of the major sponsors that he has at his Monster Energy is marketing Ty Gibbs. It's really good for the sport, and I think this could really help the sport long term. Monster Energy, one of the biggest energy drink companies in the world. Really glad to see that they are marketing Ty Gibbs. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about the number 24. As with William Byron winning the NASCAR Cup Series race at Darlington yesterday, that was the 100th win for the number 24 car. Obviously, Jeff Gordon scored 93 NASCAR Cup Series victories, and also William Byron has scored 7 of those victories. Congratulations to that number to reaching 100 wins, an iconic number in NASCAR Cup Series history, and William Byron is beginning to become an icon in the sport with his 7th NASCAR Cup Series victory. He's definitely becoming a championship threat and a contender, and he's looking really strong currently at the moment for the championship at the moment. Congratulations to the 24 car on picking up the victory. Really huge for the sport. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about the daily Downforce car. As many of you probably saw yesterday, multiple NASCAR YouTubers, including Eric Eastep, The Iceberg, Darren Gilliam, aka Black Flags Matter, of course, Danny B, Danny Baldwin, the Scene Vault podcast guys, and your garage guys were on the car of the daily Downforce. This is really huge for YouTube. This car, unfortunately, went to the garage. I think it finished 69 laps down in this race. Nice, very nice number. But we saw that car, and it was huge to see that. And it's something that I would love to do one day is sponsor a NASCAR Cup Series car. Congratulations to all of those guys on getting their car, and really awesome to see that they were able to get on a NASCAR Cup Series car. Congratulations to all of them, and well-deserved, in my opinion, for them to get the opportunity and a shot to get onto a NASCAR Cup Series car. Huge congratulations to them on that. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about a parity test. Now, there's been a lot of talk about a parity test that happened recently. And Bob Poggers put out a tweet on Saturday afternoon that he basically says that no surprise, it sounds like Ford seems a little behind all the other manufacturers. He says he does not expect any changes to be made, though, in 2023. Obviously, when you look at all the manufacturers, Toyota and Chevy are the 2 best manufacturers currently at the moment, where they've won all but one of the races. Meanwhile, Ford has only scored 1 win in 2023, and that's come at a super speedway race. Now, they could have won some other races like at Martinsville, but they have not really had a lot of pace and speed in 2023. And obviously, they got to figure out what is going on. So hopefully they can figure it out, get their solution taken care of so they can perform a little bit better, because this is one of the worst starts Ford has ever had. Granted, they've had a lot of good races and a lot of good finishes, but it's just been really frustrating to basically watch Ford be behind all the other manufacturers. Hopefully they can figure this issue out and become a little more competitive. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Akinori Ogata. As it was announced this morning that Akinori Ogata is going to drive the 46th Figure de God Racing this weekend at North Wilkesboro. Akinori Ogata has won a couple races at Hickory Motor Speedway and is also racing in the Truck Series in select races over the last few years. It's really great to see that Akinori Ogata is going to be back behind the wheel. I'm not sure how he's going to perform this weekend. Glory to God Racing seemed to qualify a lot better this year than they have in the past, but they seem to struggle in the races and can't seem to finish the races. So hopefully Akinori Ogata can come in there and have a really strong run. I'm not expecting him to do very good, but I think Akinori could have a decent run if he can survive. There might be a lot of carnage this Saturday. We'll have to wait and see, but he'll be competing in the first points-paying race in NASCAR at the track since 1996. Wishing him the best of luck, and hopefully he can do really good this weekend at North Wilkesboro. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about the chassis on the right side of the cars. As Bob Poggers put out a tweet, he said that NASCAR sent emails Friday detailing changes to the chassis of the passenger side of the car with some updates to the gusset plates. Now, for those of you wanting to know what this is about, basically at the NASCAR Cup Series race at Talladega a few weeks ago, Kyle Larson got clobbered in Team Bow by Ryan Preece. And when you look at the damage that Kyle Larson suffered, it was extreme. So a lot of the drivers drivers were wanting NASCAR to figure this out and get the situation taken care of. Well, looks like NASCAR is taking the right steps and precautions to try to fix this issue and go ahead and fix this problem with the chassis, because you don't want that on the left side. Now, the good thing about the driver's side is there's a lot more reinforcement steel on the left side of the car, where basically the driver's seat is. The right side has a lot less of that. But they want to make that a little bit stronger, which I think makes a lot of sense. And I think NASCAR is doing a really good job to go ahead and take some major precautions in regards to that. So hopefully they can get that situation taken care of, get that situation resolved, and hopefully things do end up going in the right direction there, and they can figure out what to do about that. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the GMR Grand Prix. As the IndyCar Series race at Indianapolis Road Course 2 weeks before the Indianapolis 500, which is next week, and the GMR Grand Prix happened. And the race came down to two drivers, Alex Palou and really was Christian Lundgaard, who were the two best cars all day. Unfortunately, Christian Lundgaard got off on a really bad strategy, and Alex Palou took advantage of that, and he would dominate this race, and he would come off the corner and win the GMR Grand Prix, becoming the 5th driver win so far in the IndyCar season, and was able to win. A lot of good momentum going into Indianapolis 500 weekend, especially the Chip Ganassi team was really strong there last year, and it's really good to see Alex Palou back in victory. He looks really strong currently at the moment right now for this championship. He's the current points leader at the moment right now, so fantastic day for him. Congratulations to him, and good to see Alex Palou picking up the victory, a well-deserved win for him. Congratulations to him on picking up the victory, a well-deserved victory for him. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Martin Truex Jr. Now, after the NASCAR Cup Series race, Martin Truex Jr. spoke to the media about the wreck that he was involved in, and spoke on what happened in regards to that wreck going into turn number 2, where he got into Joey Logano. Well, Martin Truex Jr. basically said he got tight going to turn number 1, and unfortunately really had nothing he could do. Tried to turn the car to the left, tried to turn the steering to the left, and his car got so tight he had no control over it. Unfortunately, just went up on the outside of Joey Logano, ended up wrecking him and a ton of cars. And he says a lot of that resulted from the wreck with him and Ross Chastain, where on the last lap of stage number 2, Martin Truex Jr. was trying to pass Ross Chastain for the stage win, and Martin Truex Jr. just got a little tight and ended up unfortunately wrecking himself. Look, Martin Truex Jr. did definitely make a couple mistakes, and characteristically mistakes, because when you see Martin Truex Jr., he is not a very aggressive guy. However, in the situation there, I can't really be mad at Martin Truex Jr. because his car had a lot of damage from that situation. I felt like this car was a little bit too tight. He basically felt bad for the driver that got involved, and of course, that was Joey Logano. I know that Martin and Joey have had history, especially from 2018 and other years as well. But still, I do believe that Martin Truex Jr. did not do that on purpose. Just the car got tied on him, unfortunately, and sometimes that is going to happen with these next-gen cars. So it's unfortunate what happened. Martin did not want that to happen, and in my honest opinion, I don't think he really did anything wrong. Well, he did cause a wreck, but I don't think he intentionally did anything wrong. It was just an accidental mistake and just an honest mistake that he made. Hopefully things do work out. He can talk to Logano about it and see what happened, because he took out a lot of good cars, but it really was unfortunately not his fault in the situation. When your car gets tight, you really can't control it in those situations. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Ross Chastain. Now, a couple old school drivers who've retired from NASCAR kind of gave their opinions on Ross Chastain over the weekend. This is, of course, before all the incidents that happened here yesterday. And Daryl Waltrip said on Saturday that says blaming everything on Ross is absolutely ridiculous. Jeff Bodine also kind of reiterated the same things that Dale Jarrett said. Ernie Irvan also had a little bit of a different opinion on Ross Chastain, saying eventually you're going to run out of people that are going to work with you and respect you. And Ernie Irvan's a perfect guy to kind of talk to you about Ross Chastain, because I compare Ross Chastain a little bit to Ernie Irvan, simply because of the fact that Ernie Irvan was kind of like Ross Chastain. When he was younger and trying to prove himself, he was making a lot of mistakes out on the racetrack. Now, when I will say about Dale Jarrett's comments, the main guy I want to talk about, I do agree with that. I don't think Ross Chastain should be blamed for everything. It seems like every time we have an incident in Ross Chastain, we tend to blame him. But we're not going to give the guy the benefit of the doubt, because how aggressive the guy has been over the years. And it seems like he's always in position for things like this to happen. So that's why he ends up getting blamed for a lot of situations that he ends up being involved in. So I think that's why he gets blamed for everything, even though I don't think he's at fault for every situation that happens. I still believe that he's got to calm down just a little bit and start racing a little bit less aggressive. But I do agree with Dale Jarrett in that aspect, that basically he's really not at fault for that every situation, but it seems like it's really easy to blame Ross Chastain for incidents because Ross Chastain has been over-aggressive time and time again and has made a lot of drivers angry and upset. So I think that's why a lot of people are mad and blame Ross Chastain pretty quickly. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Carson Osbar and Roger Carruth. Now, I believe it was in stage 3 of the race, if I'm not mistaken, around 50 laps to go, Carson Osbar and Roger Carruth, I believe, were battling for maybe a top 5 or top 10 spot. And Roger Carruth basically got in turn Carson Osbar going into turn number 1. Now, Roger Carruth was able to finish in 6th. Lawson was actually tending for a win before caution came out of 2 laps ago in the race before his drop back to 6th. Meanwhile, Carson Osbar was able to recover up to 5th position. Carson Osbar basically responded to the situation, and he says he kind of had it coming and says a lot of guys don't respect me on the track, and I got to reap what I sow for the mistakes I made. It's good to see that Carson Osbar's taking it with stride. Obviously, Carson Osbar has had a really good Xfinity Series debut as well, where he ended up finishing 6th with the second race, I should say, not his Xfinity debut, but his debut for Spire, where Carson had a really strong day there. But Carson Osbar, I really love the maturity right here. Carson does have a lot of growing up and maturing to do. And Roger definitely did get into Carson Osbar. There's no doubt about that. But I think a lot of people are not going to give Carson the benefit of the doubt, especially if you go on social media during the race. A lot of fans were really happy that Roger got into Carson Osbar there. Well, I think it was a little bit over the top for Roger. I still think a lot of drivers don't have respect. But Carson Osbar showed a lot of maturity right there, and he was not upset and mad at Roger for the incident. Yes, he probably didn't want to get wrecked, don't get me wrong, but at the same token, same time, you really can't blame him for doing what he did, and honestly, I'm not surprised about Roger getting a little bit aggressive. I don't think he wanted to intentionally take him out, but he did make a mistake. Nonetheless, so I'm glad that Carson is basically not mad about it, and I'm glad that he's starting to show a little bit of maturity in the situation because I think he's got to start showing a little bit of maturity as a driver and race better as a race car driver. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Ryan Truex. As after Ryan Truex was wrecked out of the NASCAR Xfinity Series race in the massive big one that took place in stage number 2, Ryan Truex spoke to the media and he says he has no races up right now lined up for the future currently at the moment. And he's hoping to race more in 2023 and is trying to work on plans for 2024. I really hope Ryan Truex makes some more starts in this 19 car because Ryan Truex has been absolutely outstanding this year. He's been really fast this year, has already scored a win at Dover, and I think Ryan Truex deserves an opportunity to go full-time in that number 19 car next year in Xfinity, or if somehow Mark Truex Jr. retires, go full-time in the Cup Series. He's a very, very good driver. He's finally gotten the opportunities he deserved. It's not just based off the win either. You go to some of the other races that he has ran. He ran really good at Phoenix, finishing 2nd. He finished third at Atlanta. It's been generally consistent and really fast this season. I really hope that Ryan Truex ends up getting an opportunity to go full-time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series or the Cup Series next year with a really good team. He deserves an opportunity. He deserves a shot. And I really do hope that Ryan Truex gets that shot and opportunity to go and race next year in full-time. So hopefully that ends up happening. I want him to be full-time because I think Ryan Truex is an extremely talented and a really good driver. And hopefully we see Ryan Truex go full-time because he absolutely deserves a shot and absolutely deserves an opportunity, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Ryan Newman. Now, Ryan Newman made his official return to the NASCAR Cup Series yesterday at Darlington Raceway. And he was complaining on the radio that he was starting to have a little bit of discomfort, saying that he felt like he got punched in the ribs 3 times. Now, I don't think that was from the wreck that happened in stage number 3. He says from a little bit of the discomfort that was in the seat. Now, Ryan Newman is scheduled to run 5 races in 2023. This is the first time he was running. He will run at North Wilkesboro. He's also going to run at one of the 2 Richmond races and is going to run Darlington, I believe, later this year in the Southern 500 as well, if I'm not mistaken. Now, Ryan Newman, obviously, it's this is the first time that Ryan Newman had him back, and Ryan Newman qualified very, very well. Ryan Newman is always a driver that qualifies very, very well for races, and he said he had some pretty good speed on his return, but unfortunately with how strong Truex Jr. was early in the race, he went multiple laps down and never ended up recovering, and unfortunately brought out the caution to cause a lot of the chaos that we're going to be talking about here later in this episode. But when I think about Ryan Newman's return, he did pretty solid. I think Rick Ward's a team that's got a lot of work to do. They're trying to get better. And I think Ryan Newman, if he can help this, could be someone that could really help this team become a better organization. But it was just really awesome and cool to see Ryan Newman come back to the NASCAR Cup Series and race. And he says he had a lot of fun. He says, "Are you having a lot of fun?" Noah Lewis asked him yesterday. And he said, "Yeah, I'm definitely having a lot of fun. I'm glad I'm back in the NASCAR Cup Series. I got to figure out some of the kinks, some issues with this car, but I hope to be racing again a lot more." And it's good to see Ryan Newman back. And just see him back in a NASCAR Cup Series car was amazing and incredible. And glad to see that he was able to get back. And he looked pretty good in the race. It's just a shame that basically he had some issues on the track, but still nonetheless, glad to see Ryan Newman back. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the 4, the 6, and the 9. Now, NASCAR, after the big one that happened, Truex Jr., or actually the Kyle Larson wreck, if I'm not mistaken, and the Chastain wreck, NASCAR, I think it was actually the Truex wreck and stuff, NASCAR had a really, really weird situation with the scoring loops, where they put a bunch of drivers in the wrong positions. Well, basically it was reported later, NASCAR's explanation is, they said they kept them in their positions because of scoring loop and kept reasonable speed. Now, what's really interesting and weird is all 3 of these cars were damaged cars. How are cars that are damaged and in the wreck ahead of cars that weren't in the wreck? Drivers like Harrison Burton and Bubba Wallace, who should have clearly been ahead of Kevin Harvick, who should have clearly been ahead of Chase Elliott, and should have been ahead of Brad Keselowski, because Bubba Wallace was frustrated after the race, and I think he's justified to be frustrated, because this, in my opinion, was a really, really bad call on NASCAR's part. There's no doubt in my mind that NASCAR is having a tough time, but again, if a driver's involved in the wreck, they should not be ahead of cars that were not involved in the wreck. Bubba Wallace got through the wreck and deserved to be up there to contend for the win with William Byron. And I have a feeling Bubba Wallace could have had a shot at winning this race if NASCAR had got their scoring lips right. If they dropped Bubba back to like 9th position, and he should have been higher up than Kevin Harvick, Brad Keselowski, and Chase Elliott. Now, Bubba Wallace, Harrison Burton still got very respectful finishes, but they were not happy after the race, and it's very, very justified. I don't blame them for being frustrated. NASCAR, once again, being so inconsistent with their calling and being absolutely wrong with the calls they make on the racetrack. But what's new at this point? It seems like it's a week-by-week basis where NASCAR is inconsistent with their calling and their rules. It's very frustrating. It gets really ridiculous, and NASCAR needs to do a better job with this. But again, I'm not shocked or surprised that NASCAR, once again, was stupid in a situation. Not shocked by it at all at this point. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Busch and Ross Chastain. Now, before the big incident we're going to talk about later in this episode, we got to talk about Kyle Busch and Ross Chastain. So Kyle Busch and Ross Chastain have had a little bit of history over the last couple weeks. And Kyle Busch basically feels like that Ross Chastain basically kind of brake checked him on pit road. And Kyle Busch was not happy with Ross Chastain and basically called him, said he's such an idiot. Now, like I said, Kyle Busch and Ross Chastain have had a little bit of history this year. You go back to earlier this year, I believe it was at Kona, Kyle Busch called out Ross Chastain after the race. Then at Kansas, Kyle Busch was really frustrated with Ross Chastain, but also it wasn't just Ross Chastain he was mad at a lot of other drivers in the racing etiquette on the track. But this is now the 3rd race that Kyle Busch has been frustrated with Ross Chastain. And Ross Chastain has been in the headlines for some good reasons and also for a lot of bad reasons as well. And obviously, it's not surprising Kyle Busch frustrated, because that could have been a good day for Kyle Busch, obviously. He could have had a really, really strong run and a great day. And basically, Kyle Busch did still end up having a very good day, finishing in 7th. A nice recovery for Kyle Busch. But still, I don't blame Kyle Busch being frustrated with Chastain. He's done a lot of things that have frustrated him, and I can't be surprised. I'm not surprised or shocked that we're seeing this kind of stuff where drivers are getting frustrated with each other in that situation. So not surprised to see Kyle Busch frustrated with Chastain, because it seems like everyone is getting frustrated with Ross Chastain on a week-by-week basis. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Ross Chastain and Noah Gragson. Now, last week, of course, at Kansas Speedway, we saw Ross Chastain and Noah Gragson get into a fight and get into a scuffle. And they actually have been responding to a lot of the media over the last couple days. And Ross spoke to the media on Saturday morning, and he says that Noah called him Sunday night, and they had a conversation, and Ross returned the call. Then both ran micro sprints on Monday, and they say things are good between both of the drivers. They were sitting next to each other, and there was no tension between both of them. This is really, really good to see, at least on this situation, because again, Ross Chastain and Noah Gragson, they got into a scuffle and a fight, and Noah was very, very happy with Ross Chastain. Obviously, we want both drivers to work together. They've had a little bit of issues. Of course, they had issues, I think, from Talladega as well that kind of stemmed over into this weekend. So it is good nonetheless to see that both drivers were able to talk it out on the phone. They didn't really want to get in a fight. And Chastain never really wants to get in the fights, and we're going to talk about the fights here in just a little bit. But overall, it's good to see both drivers were able to come together and talk to each other about the situation, and hopefully they can move on and move past this situation and can both focus on trying to have the best runs they can, because Ross Chastain's going to be contending for wins, and Noah Gragson's probably going to be running 25th, and that's no disrespect to Noah Gragson. It's just the reality. He's probably not going to be running up front on a week-by-week basis. So nonetheless, hoping they can get a situation taken care of. I'm glad to see both of them were able to talk after the race. Really good stuff to see. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Larson and John Hunter Nemechek. Now, if you watch a NASCAR Xfinity Series race, you saw the amazing finish that took place at the end of that race between Kyle Larson and John Hunter Nemechek. So, in the last couple of laps, we went back green with John Hunter and Kyle Larson on the inside row, and they were both to clear Justin Allgaier. Now, John Hunter had a better short-run car than Kyle Larson, but as a longer run went into play near the end of the race, Kyle Larson's car really started coming in, and he went into turn number 1 and started arcing the corner, and he started making up a tenth or two. As they were coming to the white flag of the race, Larson and Nemechek were about a tenth or two ahead of each other. And they went into turn number 1, and Larson used that high line to get to the inside, and they were side by side, beating and banging, going down the backstretch. As they went to turn number 3, Kyle Larson was able to clear for the race lead, and then John Hunter tried to come back as it came down turn number 4. Larson really had nothing he could do. Larson comes off the wall, gets into John Hunter Nemechek. John Hunter hits the inside wall, and Kyle Larson goes on to win his first ever race in any series at Darlington Raceway. Now, John Hunter was able to respond and talk about it, but John Hunter was not mad at Kyle Larson. He said himself that that was good, hard racing for the win. Looking at the situation, I saw a lot of people that were really, really mad at Kyle Larson for the racing. But look, John Hunter wrecked himself. And let's be honest, that's just good hard racing for the win. It felt like 2003 Xfinity race at Darlington where both drivers ended up wrecking. That is good hard racing for the win. And that's the kind of racing we want to see as race fans, is good, hard, but good racing for the win. And honestly, I think they both put on an excellent and a really good show for the victory. And John Hunter has a lot of respect for Kyle Larson, so I think that's why he wasn't mad at Kyle Larson, because he thought that was really, really good and fun racing to watch. And honestly, I think every fan should be happy about that kind of racing, because it was very, very enjoyable, really fun to watch, and I absolutely enjoyed the race on Saturday, and glad to say both put on an excellent and good finish, because that was a very good and great finish, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Billy Scott. Now, on Friday, Billy Scott got ejected for something on the car. Now, this is the second week in a row that the 45 team has been penalized in pre-race inspection. However, it seems like it's got nothing to do with it being back-to-back weeks of basically being suspended. There are potential major penalties that are coming, though, for Tyler Reddick that could be coming as soon as tomorrow, which we'll probably talk about that if there's any penalties that do come from that when we get that major breaking news. We don't know exactly what it is. We're not entirely sure exactly what happened with Billy Scott right there and what exactly they were doing to the car, but if they were doing something to the car and messing with that, they're probably going to end up getting in a lot of trouble and probably be getting handed some major and massive penalties. And that's not good for that team, because Billy Scott has done a pretty good job as crew chief with Tyler Reddick, and Reddick's in the top of the points. This will probably, if Reddick gets like his L1 penalty, which is going to probably be a 60-point penalty, very similar to Austin Dillon ended up getting, I would imagine, expect that this is going to be a pretty huge penalty if they do receive any penalties, and this could be really affect their chances at they're in the playoffs already, but having a shot at maybe winning the regular season championship, especially now since we're halfway through the regular season championship now. I would imagine there's some probably huge repercussions that could come into play when it comes to this. It's going to be something to watch for sure. We're going to have to wait and see what happens in regards to that, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on, especially when it comes to this situation. We'll definitely be keeping a close eye on this situation. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Daryl Waltrip. As it was announced during the end of stage number 2, that Daryl Waltrip is going to be joining the Fox broadcast booth this weekend at North Wilkesboro. This will be the first time that Daryl Waltrip has been in the Fox broadcast since last year's Bristol Dirt NASCAR Cup Series race. It's going to feel really awesome to see Daryl Waltrip back in the NASCAR Cup Series booth, and I think it makes a lot of sense to bring Daryl Waltrip in. Daryl Waltrip had a ton of success and won quite a few races in his NASCAR Cup Series career at North Wilkesboro. Obviously, he was part of that controversy in 1990 with the scoring, but he was absolutely really amazing and great at this racetrack and won a lot of races. And even though Daryl Waltrip the last couple of years commentating at Fox wasn't as good, Daryl Waltrip is still one of the greatest commentators and color commentators in NASCAR Cup Series history, and I think he will do a pretty good job. He's probably toned it down a little bit. He's gotten older, but I think he will do a very, very good job being in the broadcast booth because I don't think he'll be able to be real, and he's going to be able on the All Series be able to go boogity, boogity, boogie. Let's go racing drivers. That's going to be really, really cool to listen to and really, really fun to watch. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm excited to see that Daryl Waltrip's going to be in the booth. I think he's going to do a really awesome and a really, really good job. And I'm definitely looking forward to see Daryl Waltrip back in the Fox Sports booth because I think he's going to do a really awesome and great job, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kasey Kahne. Now, we've got a couple drivers who are very interested in making a return to NASCAR, and one of those drivers is Kasey Kahne. As Kasey Kahne was being interviewed by Dalton Hopkins from Frontstretch, and Kasey Kahne says that he's actually had thoughts about maybe returning to NASCAR and returning to a NASCAR Cup Series car. Now, the last time Kasey Kahne raced in the NASCAR Cup Series was in 2018, driving for Levi Family Racing, and the last race I believe he ran was the Southern 500. The reason he stepped out is because of his health. He had some health issues, some dehydration issues, from what I understand. But he says it's been a while, but he says he's actually feeling a lot better, and he would love to come back and race in the NASCAR Cup Series. And I would love for Kasey Kahne to come back too. Now, do I think Kasey Kahne would be successful? I'm going to be honest. I don't think Kasey Kahne, if he came back, would be extremely successful. But it would definitely be really fun and awesome to see him come back to the NASCAR Cup Series and race. It's been a very long time since he's raced, and maybe he'd be very successful. Maybe I'm a little bit exaggerating here, but I would love to see Kasey Kahne have a shot and an opportunity to race in the NASCAR Cup Series again and race for a team. He probably would drive for a team like Ricker Racing or a smaller team in the Cup Series. Maybe somehow like a Lift Fast or something, they give him a shot opportunity. Or maybe Trackhouse in Project 1. I think Justin Mars has had Kasey Kahne in the past and worked with Kasey in the past. But I would definitely nonetheless love to see Kasey Kahne come back and race in the NASCAR Cup Series. It would be really, really fun to watch. And I hope someday he does make a return. Will he return in 2023? Unless he drives for a team like Live Fast Motorsports, probably not. But you never know. Anything's possible, and nothing's off the table at this point. So we'll have to see what happens and wait and see. But maybe we'll see him back behind a wheel at some point in a NASCAR Cup Series car. Because I think a lot of us fans, and I think many would agree with me on this, I think a lot of us would definitely love to see Kasey Kahne back behind the wheel of a NASCAR Cup Series car. And hopefully he gets a chance to do that. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about fights. Now, we of course talk about the Ross Chastain and Noah Gragson fight, as that was probably the biggest story of last week, was that fight. Now, a lot of drivers gave their opinions when it came to fights. Kyle Reddick basically said earlier in the week that he said that NASCAR probably should let both drivers be able to get punches in before security breaks them up. Ryan Blaney says that both drivers should be able to get a punch in as well before security breaks them up and then eventually let security break them up. Daniel Suarez says nothing comes good from it except basically commercials. Joey Logano has mixed thoughts on it in the situation there. Kyle Busch probably had the most strongest opinions when it comes to fights. He says that Noah Gragson probably shouldn't have been the one to send a message, and he also is advocating for hockey rules for 30 seconds before they do end up fighting. Kyle Larson says he's not really a fighter. He doesn't really want to get into fights. I think he said he'd be okay with it, but he's really not a fighter. Kevin Harvick is one of the people that's kind of against it. He said he's really not a big fan of fights, which is kind of ironic coming from the guy who said about 10 or 15 years ago that he said he likes fights. So basically a change in the culture over the last few years. And Bubba Wallace also kind of gave his thoughts on fights as well, kind of saying a little bit mixed reactions, I think, as well, when it came to fights. Now, when it comes to NASCAR Cup Series fights and fights out on the racetrack, especially the one that happened there, obviously a lot of people are talking about the fight. And you want to know my opinion? Honestly, I hope both drivers do end up getting a punch. I think it was a little bit, I think people are going to call the move that Chastain made a cheap shot. Personally, I don't think the move that he made was a cheap shot. I thought that was just basically a punch because Chastain told him a couple times stop. And then Chastain eventually got frustrated and punched Gragson. And then he put his hands up after, saying basically a little bit of reaction. That was not normal Ross Chastain, but he was frustrated by being grabbed. And I can't blame Ross Chastain for throwing the punch when Noah was grabbed multiple times. But I also think at the same time, they should have absolutely 100% given Noah a shot and opportunity to throw a punch at Chastain. And honestly, if they both fought him through punches, I probably would think that Noah could beat Ross Chastain up. Because Noah Gragson's a guy that's basically really tough, but also Ross Chastain's a farmer, so you don't want to really mess with these farmers. So in my opinion, when it comes to fights in a situation, both drivers should be able to punch. Again, you don't want security and other people in pit road being effed up and basically getting hit and stuff, injured. We don't want what happened last year, Martins with Sam Mayer and Ty Gibbs on pit road. We don't want officials getting seriously injured and seriously hurt. So there's two sides of the situation. I think, though, both drivers need to basically be able to fight and get into scuffles and be able to punch each other before NASCAR steps in. But that is just my honest opinion when it comes to that. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about teams and NASCAR. Now, early in the weekend on Friday morning, Jenna Fryer put out a report in regards to a letter that the teams had sent to NASCAR. And the teams are asking NASCAR for meaningful discussions on permanent charters. Denny Hamlin actually responded to this situation. They said basically that they're basically not talking to NASCAR, really not communicating to all teams anymore. They're just going by team, and they're not basically speaking to all teams. Now, one of the things we need to talk about is permanent charters. Why do the teams want permanent charters? Well, it's very simple. Permanent charters, because especially how expensive charters have become, because we know the charter prices have skyrocketed to around that $30 million range. Teams want these charters to be permanent because of how much money they've invested in the charters. But one of the things I think NASCAR is looking at in their side of the situation is they're looking at they can make some changes, not make it permanent, but they can make some changes to the charter rule. But again, the teams really do want it to be a permanent charter system. And I can't blame the teams right here for wanting the charters to be permanent, especially if how expensive charters have gotten over the last few years. I can't blame them for wanting to make charters completely permanent currently at the moment. So I'm not really surprised by this. If you want my honest opinion, you should probably just give the teams what they want or find a way to come to a compromise because we are in the middle of May. And while we're not at a really breaking point at this time yet, I don't know if we're ever going to reach a breaking point, NASCAR and the teams do need to eventually come together and figure out a solution to this problem because things got to be figured out quickly, and I do hope that they're able to figure out a solution going forward and get the situation sorted out because in my honest opinion, if they can't get the situation together and the situation sorted out, this could be a really big issue long-term going forward, so I really hope and pray that the teams in NASCAR can come together with the solution because they do need to figure out a solution to this problem and get it figured out, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Alex Bowman. Now, Alex Bowman was back in the media for the first time since basically the injuries that he suffered. And he gave an update in regards to potential return to NASCAR. Alex Bowman says that he's no timetable on a return. He goes to the doctor on Wednesday for scans. He could return at the All-Stars if scans are good. Now, according to what he said, he was an L3 vertebrae fracture. He says that, like I said, if scans are good, he can return at North Wilkesboro. If not, if Alex Bowman does not return at North Wilkesboro this weekend, Josh Berry will have to qualify his way in. Now, in past years in rules, it's been interesting because they've let guys in the same number be able to get into the race, but I think things have changed in the last 15 years because Josh Berry's not full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series, but they've done that in the past where they let the number be able to get in. Look, Alex Bowman needs to take his time, especially right now he's only 5 points below the cutoff line. I think Alex Bowman should take his time to recover. He should not rush his recovery back. If I was Alex Bowman and be a little smart, if the scans are not good, sit out a week or two more, maybe just sit out for the Cup Series race in North Wilkesboro, and then maybe, come back for the Coke 600. I think the All-Star race, you don't want to come back for a non-points pain race, especially if you're not feeling good. So I hope Alex Bowman can take the precautions and come back when he's absolutely ready. But it's good to hear Alex Bowman's voice and glad to see that he's back walking around and stuff. We know exactly what it is. He said he's basically got to go do the scans, and we at least know exactly. He said he's going to do the scans, which he said was will be the first time he's done scans since he suffered the injury. And he said if the scans are good, he will be back behind the wheel of a NASCAR Cup Series car in the upcoming race in North Wilkesboro. I hope Alex Bowman can continue to take the right precautions and procedures to get back behind the wheel. We miss you, Alex, and a lot of us fans do miss you. So hopefully he can get back behind the wheel really, really soon. But at the same token, same time, he takes the right precautions and right steps to make sure that he feels good enough to get back behind the wheel. But like I said, happy to hear Alex Bowman's voice once again. Glad to see that he's looking to get back behind the wheel really, really soon. It sucks that he had an injury and we want to see him back, but I hope he takes the right precautions to get back behind the wheel soon. So hopefully he'll get the scans good, and we'll hopefully find out by Wednesday if he's going to be back or not. We likely will find out later in this week. We might discuss that on Wednesday. I have a breaking news video if that ends up breaking that he's coming back. If he does announce that he's not coming back, we'll also probably have a video talk about that later this week as well. So we'll wait on that, but it sounds like Bowman will be waiting on those scans on Wednesday and goes to the doctor in a couple days. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Ross Chastain and Kyle Larson. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race at Darlington, both drivers got into it. So, first, later in the series, basically in the beginning of stage number 3, Ross Chastain basically squeezed Kyle Larson up into the outside wall. Then, on one of the later race restarts, Kyle Larson was on the bottom, and he goes and squeezed Ross Chastain up into the outside wall. Then we saw Ross basically asked on the radio, "Are we even?" He said that, so he's situationally aware of the situation. Well, on the following restart, Ross Chastain ended up going up there, making a really, really bonsai move, making a stupid, idiotic move, and ends up wrecking himself and Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson, obviously not happy, kept running to Ross Chastain on the passenger side for a really, really long time. Then there was radio communication between Cliff Daniels and Kyle Larson saying, Cliff Daniels basically saying, that's 3 times now Chevrolet been wrecked by Ross Chastain, Chevy. That's 3 times. Get your driver in line. And then Kyle Larson also called Ross Chastain a hack. Now, at the NASCAR Cup Series race, I can't remember who's the one who basically, I think it was maybe Gragson Smith who talked to Ross Chastain, and Ross Chastain basically said, "Oh, you're talking to me." He said, "I got tired and I basically made a mistake." And once again, and he said, "Oh, you're talking to me." Then, in the media center, after William Byron, of course, won the NASCAR Cup Series race, Rick Kendrick spoke to the media about the situation, and he says it's getting old with Ross Chastain. This is the 3rd time now that Ross Chastain has wrecked people, and he needs Ross to calm down. And he's telling, I don't care if he's a Team Chevy driver. Even basically, my drivers allowed to do what they need to do. Basically, giving the go-ahead for his drivers, basically wreck Ross Chastain if Ross Chastain continues to drive like a complete moron and a complete idiot. And I'm going to talk about Ross Chastain right here. Let me say this. I really like Ross Chastain. I truly do. But there's been so many times in the last year, especially in the last about a year and a half, I say, really since probably last year Gateway, where Ross Chastain has driven in way over his head. And this is now about the 3rd or 4th or 5th week in a row where Ross Chastain has been involved in an incident. And like I said, this is now the 3rd time in the last 4 weeks where this guy has been wrecked by Ross Chastain. You go back to Talladega. While Ross Chastain was not completely at fault for what happened in Talladega between him and Noah Gragson, he still made the move, he still made the bold move, and caused one of the later wrecks that took Larson out. Dover drives way over in his head, is way over aggressive, and ends up wrecking Brendan Poole, and Kyle Larson gets damaged from that, and now this is the 3rd freaking time that he's been wrecked by Kyle Larson, wrecked by Ross Chastain, because Ross Chastain does not have any situational awareness at times. He needs to calm down, because Ross Chastain is not going to win a championship. And Ross Chastain deserves to be in the Cup Series. Don't get me wrong. The guy can drive a race car. He's extremely talented. But he drives a lot of times way in over his head. And that's one of the things about Ross. He's got to calm it down. And Justin Marks needs to talk to Ross about calming it down. And Chevy, they need to talk to him about this, because this is getting a little bit absurd and a little bit ridiculous to watch. And it's every single week, it seems like, with Ross, where he's getting into fights with people. He got in a fight with him, and he's pissed off a lot of drivers. He's made a lot of drivers in the Chevy camp mad. Kyle Busch. He's made basically Noah Gragson pissed off. Kyle Larson. Chase Elliott. His own teammates been pissed off at him. Alex Bowman. I said Daniel Suarez is pissed off at him. You got Ford drivers been mad at him. You've obviously got Brendan Poole was really frustrated, saying someone needs to go beat him up. You've had drivers in Toyota camp been frustrated with Chastain. I think Truex been pissed off in the last year. Denny Hamlin's been pissed off in the last year. Ross has to calm down, because he's never going to win a championship racing like this. I want this guy to succeed. The guy's in the Cup Series for a reason. He can win races. He can win championships. Trackhouse has the speed. He has to calm it down. It's a week-by-week basis thing. If he can calm down, he overlooks carelessness and makes some of the aggressive moves, but be smart about, like some of the stuff he did at Dover, the guy's going to go far and win a lot of races. Because I think Justin Marks, even though he's been behind his drivers, he's eventually going to get tired of it. He's going to get tired of having wrecked cars every single week. It seems like every week he's got wrecked race cars. He's got drivers pissed off at his drivers. He needs to calm it down, and he needs to be a little bit more respectful out on the racetracks. It's getting old really, really fast, and I'm getting tired of drivers getting wrecked that don't deserve to be wrecked because of stupidity. And yes, you can say Kyle Larson was over-aggressive for the mistakes on the track, but again, Chastain needs to calm it down. It's getting old really, really fast, and I'm getting tired of Chastain driving in way over his head. He just needs to calm down the aggression, in my honest opinion. Now we're going to jump on to the first two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Carl Edwards. Now, Carl Edwards, for the first time since 2016, was officially spotted out in the wild as he was at a Darlington Raceway and basically was being honored on the NASCAR 75 greatest NASCAR drivers of all time. And also, Carl Edwards, during stage number 2, joined the Fox broadcast booth. And honestly, he was probably the best part of that Fox broadcast this past weekend because the Fox broadcast this past weekend was not very good. But he basically said that he's interested in getting into the simulator and he's not ruling out a return actually to racing. And he actually said he would love to do it if he wanted to return. Now, Carl Edwards has not raced in the NASCAR Cup Series since 2016 season when he retired and unofficially around my birthday in 2017. I think it was on January 10th or January 11th of 2017. Carl Edwards would officially announce retirement from the NASCAR Cup Series. But Carl Edwards has been in the spotlight more. And when basically he was on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio speaking to Dave Moody, and he said that he basically said that he was going to visit the Trackhouse Racing facility and the shop. Now, he said he wasn't going to return. But it's very interesting that the last couple of weeks, we've been hearing more and more about Carl Edwards saying that he's interested in maybe returning to NASCAR. Now, if Carl Edwards was returned to the NASCAR Cup Series, and I think a lot of us fans really would love for Carl Edwards to make a return. I think there's definitely more of a chance now that he could return. Now, if he does return to the NASCAR Cup Series, what team would he want to drive for? Now, obviously, I think there's a couple potential possibilities where he could go. Obviously, one of the teams he could drive for is Trackhouse Racing, which, of course, the team that he's planning to go and visit that shop. Trackhouse is a very, very fast team. And he, of course, could drive that Project 91 car. Now, that Project 91 car is meant for drivers that are international. But I think that Justin Marks would make an exception for a driver like Carl Edwards. And I think Carl could really be there. And Carl Edwards is in really good shape, by the way. But I think that'd be a good team to go to. The second team would be 2311 Racing. Now, remember, at the beginning of the 2023 season at Daytona 500, there was an image that surfaced, and there were two drivers live we're looking at. I initially thought that it was actually going to be Carl Edwards, considering Carl Edwards had been part of that Joe Gibbs Racing stable, and 2311 has an alliance with Joe Gibbs Racing. I thought there was a potential chance that Carl Edwards could drive for 2311 Racing. But then eventually found out it was Travis Pastrana and not Carl Edwards. And what about maybe Junior Motorsports if they ever jump up the Cup? Obviously, Junior Motorsports, they would love to jump up to the NASCAR Cup Series in the future. Obviously, Junior Motorsports has been one of the teams that's been rumored they want to go Cup racing, though they do need to get a charter before they do get up in the NASCAR Cup Series. But I think if Junior Motorsports was ever to jump up the Cup, Carl Edwards would be the perfect driver to go with. Now, obviously, Carl Edwards, like I mentioned, has not raced in the NASCAR Cup Series since 2016, so he might be a little rusty. However, Carl Edwards retired at his prime, so maybe if Carl Edwards got back behind the wheel, and I think a lot of his fans really want Carl Edwards to come back, and even drivers in the industry really do want Carl Edwards to come back. Now, do I think he is going to return to NASCAR? I think that's very slim, but I think it's more likely a shot of him returning now than probably it would have been. He said he doesn't have plans right now, but he's not ruling it out, which tells me that I think he's interested in making a return. And I'll tell you what, as someone who grew as a Carl Edwards fan, because when I was a younger fan, Carl Edwards was probably one of my 2 or 3 favorite drivers growing up. Because one, he's from Columbia, Missouri, which I'm from the Missouri area. But also, Carl Edwards, a driver that was really, really talented, had a great personality, and a driver that I feel like should have won a championship. He came so close to winning championships in NASCAR Cup Series, 2005, 2008, 2011, 2016, all come to mind. 2005, basically tied for second in the championship in his rookie season. 2008, finishing second to Jimmy Johnson in Jimmy Johnson's prime years. 2011, would have won the consistent championship, lost in a tiebreaker, and then, of course, in 2016, got out because of a wreck. I don't know exactly why Carl Edwards retired. There's theories basically because of the concussion stuff when Dale Jr. There's a lot of theories about basically how NASCAR was being run at the time. but I do believe that Carl Edwards should come back. And also, I think Carl Edwards should also be inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame as well, because Carl Edwards, in my personal opinion, is one of the greatest NASCAR drivers ever raced. And again, do I think he's going to come back? I certainly think that there's a chance and a possibility that he does make a return. I think it comes down to a couple of teams. I don't think it's going to be any team that's like a really big team right now. It's going to be one of the newer age organizations, and maybe Junior Motorsports if they ever come up. But still, I think it really will be exciting nonetheless if Carl Edwards does make a return. I really want him to come back. I miss him. It's a pipe dream for me, but I think that he has a chance. I really want it to happen. It's the first time we've seen him in the spotlight. I really hope and pray that he does make a return to NASCAR someday, maybe in 2023 with the team. If not 2023, 2024, just Carl, come back and make closure. I don't care if it's just one race. Please, just for one race, make a return. Bring some closure to fans that have missed you for a long time, and please come back to the sport, because let's be honest, all of us fans miss you. It's good to see that you were back in the spotlight. It made me really happy. As the best part of yesterday was seeing Carl Edwards back, and I really do hope that Carl Edwards does make a one-off return to NASCAR so he can bring some closure to the fans like myself and the fans across the sport. Hopefully come back and bring some closure to the fans. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we are talking about Kurt Busch. As Kurt Busch has been updating us, and he actually brought an update yesterday to Darlington, speaking when they were talking about the Ricky Craven and Kurt Busch stuff, one of the greatest finishes, probably the greatest finish in NASCAR history. And Kurt Busch asked a question about his recovery process. Kurt Busch still has very, very big hopes of returning to the NASCAR Cup Series sometime in 2023. And he said that he's feeling much better. He said that basic recovery is going really, really well, and he's feeling the best he's felt in a very, very long time, and recovery has been tremendous. Obviously, Kurt Busch has not raced in the NASCAR Cup Series in over a year, almost a year. The last time Kurt Busch raced in the NASCAR Cup Series car and got behind the wheel of a Cup car was at Pocono Raceway, qualified for the NASCAR Cup Series race at Pocono, and since then, Kurt has not raced. And Kurt has obligated and said that he wants to return sometime in the 2023 season. Some of those wish list races that he wants to run are Watkins Glen and the Southern 500. But obviously, before he gets back behind the wheel of a NASCAR Cup Series car, Kurt Busch has to be medically cleared to get back behind the wheel. And he still, at this point, has not been medically cleared. But he's been getting closer and closer. He said there's some things that still need to be worked on. But the fact he says he's getting closer and closer to potential return to the NASCAR Cup Series makes me really, really happy and really excited. Because I'll be honest with you guys, it's been 1 year today since Kurt Busch last won a NASCAR Cup Series race. And I think seeing Kurt Busch and how emotional he gets and how invested he is in 2311 racing, make that team run, I think having him back behind the wheel for a couple races this year would be really, really awesome. And I'm going to be really happy when he does come back. Now, do I think he will come back in 2023? I think so. I think there's a really good chance he does return in 2023 and maybe does run some races next year in 2024 as well in a third 2311 racing car, because Steve Lauletta and 2311 have publicly said that they do have a third car ready to go for Kurt Busch in case Kurt does make a return. When Kurt comes back, or even Travis Strong makes some more starts, or other drivers get an opportunity in the team, they would love to for sure have him get a shot at opportunity, because Kurt Busch has been a big asset to 2311 racing. You look what he's done for 2311. Has made Bubba Wallace a better driver. You think how good Bubba Wallace has been so far this year. Bubba Wallace is coming off a lot of great runs, especially recently, where Bubba Wallace has only had one finish outside the top 15 and back-to-back top 5s and already 3 or 4 top 10s this season. He's been really coming into his own, Bubba Wallace has, over the last few weeks. And then, of course, I think Tyler Reddick. Reddick's been really strong also in 2023. And I think Kurt Busch also, he's done a really good job in the broadcast booth. I really think that Kurt Busch, we all miss you, dude. We hope he come back really, really soon. But I think Kurt needs to take his time, make sure he does the right processes. And Kurt Busch has been doing that. He's been doing the right steps. He's been taking the right steps and doing the right thing to get back behind the wheel. Now, there's another race Kurt Busch has publicly said, though, he wants to maybe look at is Chicago Street Course. Of course, we did that interview when he's in Chicago. They're getting preview for that. The Chicago Street Course race is about 2 months away, so Kurt Busch, I think that could be a potential return point for Kurt. But again, we're just going to have to wait and see. I think it'll be a little bit of a slower track when he does return. Not like one of those big tracks. I think it'll be one of the slower tracks, very similar to how Ryan Newman returned. I would think that Kurt Busch get behind the wheel of one of the slower tracks. But I think that there, like I said, is a very strong shot and a very strong possibility that Kurt Busch is going to return in 2023. We miss you, dude. It sucks that you're kind of still injured currently at the moment right now, man, but we really, really do miss you, and you're doing a really lot of great things. I love your social media presence, dude, and again, we truly do miss you. But take your time, take the right processes. Everyone's here for you. A lot of fans love you, dude, and really do hope that you get back behind the wheel really, really soon. Again, I think Kurt Busch is going to be officially back in 2023. The question is going to be when. We're just going to have to wait and see. But Kurt Busch is nonetheless a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's a driver who's had a lot of success. He's won a lot of races, 34 NASCAR Cup Series races to be exact. And I think Kurt Busch would love to come back and win that another race. And I think even after not being a Cup Series car for almost a year, I truly do believe that Kurt Busch is a driver that if you give him another opportunity, a shot, he will come back and win. He's won with a lot of organizations. He won with Team Penske, won with Ganassi, won with Roush, and then, of course, 2311, and almost won with Phoenix Racing as well. And just everything Kurt Busch has been able to accomplish in his career is phenomenal. And Kurt Busch is someone that is just a true ambassador for the sport. He deserves being the top 75 greatest drivers. And congratulations on an incredible career. But we miss you, dude. I hope you do come back this year and race. It sounds like I said, there's a really good shot and a possibility that he could make an official return. We're going to have to wait for its official timetable. I think the chances are very, very high that he does come back, but we're just going to have to wait and see. But I think the chance of him coming back in 2023 are definitely growing. I think he does return in 2023. And when it does officially announce he returns, I'm going to be cheering a lot. So that is for today's NASCAR Lawn News and Motorsports News video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe to the channel, notifications on so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links description below over that, and comment your thoughts below on today's video. When do you think Kurt Busch returns? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And do you think Carl Edwards will ever come back to NASCAR? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later today on the channel, we're going to have NASCAR Truck Series race picks for the Truck Series race at North Wilkesboro. Then on tomorrow on the channel, we're going to have the Indy 500 entry list. And there's also going to be a second video coming out of the channel. We're probably going to be talking about the penalties that Tyler Reddick's team ends up receiving because I expect some pretty big penalties coming out for that team. Then on Wednesday, there's going to be a NASCAR news video on the channel discussing news over the last couple of days. There might be a second video on the channel too. Just wait on that. Thursday is going to be race picks for the All-Star race, and then Friday will be another NASCAR news video, followed by Saturday there being maybe a couple videos on the channel. There's going to, of course, be the Truck Series race review from North Wilkesboro, followed by the All-Star Open race review. That'll be on the channel. And then Sunday, of course, will be the All-Star race review at North Wilkesboro. We might have a North Wilkesboro preview coming out on Wednesday, so expect that on the channel. A lot of content on the way. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. I'll see you guys in some really awesome content. We're trying to reach 2,500 subscribers by the end of the year. We've been really growing this channel over the last few weeks. I truly do greatly appreciate all your guys' support, and thank you guys so much for watching today's video. Take care, everybody.